Hey y'all, I'm Carolina Tony. Today the road brings me to Bluff Fort in Utah. This fort was founded by members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in the 1880s, as they were pioneers and they came here. I will tell you that this is going to be a great video because we will go into the cabins where they actually lived and we will listen to the stories from their ancestors that actually came from them, and this is going to be really cool. And we'll get started right after this station identification. Here is a overview of the fort. Right now we're standing in front of the co-op building, which is right here, and this is the co-op building. There's just a few buildings that are original. Most of them have been reconstructed to look like they did in the early days. This is the log meeting house, was a church, school, social hall, and a courthouse.
The log meeting house was built soon after the pioneers arrived in Bluff. It became a place for meetings, dances, and all kinds of public gatherings. It gave shelter in wet seasons to unfortunate families whose mud roofs failed to turn the rain, and it offered a hearty place for friends to meet and for strolling lovers to rest in the evening. It was not a church, but simply a meeting house. Albert R. Lyman.
This is a recreation of the Cooman Jones home. The Jones log cabin was located in the northeast corner of the fort. Near the turn of the century, the Joneses constructed an elegant stone home adjacent to the original cabin. The fire destroyed the Jones home in 1975. And this was the Perkins cabin.
Sarah Williams, at age 19, came along to help Ben and her sister Marianne with their children. To quote from her journal, "Imagine my surprise and indignation when about 6 miles out from Cedar City, I had the lines put in my hands and was told that was my team and wagon to drive, an experience I had never had before." When they arrived at their destination on April 6, 1880, she said, "I didn't see anything there to stop for, nor could I see how it was possible to make a town in such a place. How thankful I was I didn't have to make my home there." She was not a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but was so impressed with the people that she soon became the first convert baptism in Bluff. She said, "The longer I lived among these people, the more convinced I became that Mormonism was the religion for me. I entered the waters of baptism."
This was the Lyman cabin. It's real neat how there's a story for each cabin.
Platt D. Lyman. Platt was born in the back of a wagon on August 20th, 1848. 2 wagons had stopped on the banks of the Platte River for 30 minutes while he was born. They would travel for 2 more months before reaching the Salt Lake Valley. Platt had only 3 weeks of formal education, but his mother taught him to read and write by the age of 6. He studied the rest of his life. He cowboyed, freighted, and farmed. He provided the main source of income to his widowed mother and siblings. He loved to read and always had some books in his saddlebags. He loved horses and said, "The best thing for the inside of a man is the outside of a horse." At the age of 18, he was called to serve a mission to England. He and Adelia Robison.
Can you imagine being a settler headed west in wagons like these? Some rough, tough people. Here is an original cabin right there. This was the Joseph Barron cabin.
Mama had been washing and ironing all week. It wasn't often that we had a picture taken. In those days, we had to sit very still while the cap on the lens of the camera was removed and left off for 30 seconds or more. It must have been a daunting task getting 7 children not to wiggle, but Mama was determined. Looking back, I wonder if she somehow knew that this would be our last photograph. Caring for a large family was very hard work, and Mama didn't seem quite herself as we waited the arrival of child number 8. Papa thought Mama would have hurried him to build her new flower bin and cupboard when he brought some wood for her from one of his freighting trips. Mama kept Papa busy with other jobs and he never got around to the cupboard. It was as if she had a premonition. Mama passed away a few days after giving birth to my youngest brother, Ray Wesley. Papa had been laying out the wood for Mama's cupboards, but instead used the good wood for her coffin. It was hard to be happy after Mama died. Sometimes I would sit in her rocking chair and look at that last photograph hour after hour. I could almost feel her comforting me. We cannot see things clearly.
There's a Joseph Barton freight wagon. I don't know if that's original or a reproduction. If it was original, I would say sitting out here in the elements it would have been rotted. A Lemuel red family cabin.
In response to your letter, I was going to say that after having traveled 6 months, driving a team myself, to have a real room, to be able to stand up to dress and undress, to be able to open and close a real door, let light in through a real window, make my bed and walk around to do things, was joy unsurpassed. And even in those early days of Bluff, always had a cozy nook in our rough surroundings. Father was a thrifty person from the start. He went up the river where a settler was leaving, came home with lumber flooring, enough for one room, also a door and a window, and 6 chickens. But before this, he had taken our 2 wagon covers and made a very comfortable tent, had constructed a bedstead of pieces of dry cottonwood and corded it with rope. No castle was more appreciated.
Joseph M. Red cabin.
James Monroe Red was 16 when he joined the Hole in the Rock party to assist his older brother and father, Lemuel H., on the trail. Monroe was in charge of overseeing the cattle and horses, and when grass and feed became scarce, he separated from the company to find grazing ground. Arriving in Bluff, he helped set up living quarters for those he had grown to know and love before he returned to New Harmony, Utah. In 1884, he married Lucinda Pace, and they lived in New Harmony for the first 3 years. However, in 1887, Monroe sensed greater business prospects in southeastern Utah and moved his family to Bluff. The journey was much easier this time, with no holes to blast or roads to hew out of rock surface.
Here's the interesting thing about the fort. These cabins that's been recreated, they have been furnished from the descendants of those that once lived here. Now how cool is that? And each of these cabins has little buttons that you can press in several different languages, and it gives you the history of the people that actually lived here.
When Dale was a boy, he never imagined he would one day be called on a mission to live among Native American tribes in the West in order to learn their language, their culture, and their ways for the purpose of improving relations between Indians and the pioneer settlers. In 1855, Fales married Hannah Marie Woodbury, and they moved to a small settlement in southern Utah. Fales was away from home when a young Indian boy was visiting Hannah, and the boy removed one of the guns that Fales kept on a wall. The boy accidentally discharged the gun, and Hannah and her unborn child died from the gun wound. When Fales returned home, he was devastated. However, he did not seek retaliation.
In Bluff, watched from the windows of their small log homes,
as 100 Navajo warriors with faces painted black rode into the fort on their horses, brandishing guns. It was a threatening day in the small fort's history, for the settlers would have to save themselves if they were to survive. It was reported that a Navajo was murdered by a Mormon named Amas Watton at his trading post at Rinco, 10 miles downriver on the St. Juan, and that another Navajo had killed Amas in self-defense. And now the Navajos wanted to avenge a wrong. 2 men were at the fort that day. The aged Bishop of Bluff, Jens Nielsen, tired and stooping from his labors, came limping to meet the hostile warriors, and Crewman Jones came forward to act as an interpreter. "We are ready to talk with our friends," Jens said, "but friends do not cling to their guns while they talk. We have no guns, and if you want to talk with us, go stand your guns against the wall, and then sit with us here in a friendly circle." The courage of Jens facing the fighting, hungry Indians disarmed every hostile spirit. The older warriors were the first to dismount, and they leaned their gun against the log store and sat down cross-legged on the sand in front of the 2 white men.
Life in Bluff involved joy and sorrow. Some of the most joyous were the births, and death brought some of the saddest. 3 Decker brothers, Cornelius, James, and Nathaniel, came with their wives. James' wife, Anna, gave birth to the first baby born on the expedition, Lenora Deseret. Emma, Cornelius's wife, gave birth to the first baby born in Bluff. In 1901, diphtheria struck the family of James and Anna Marie Decker. Lynn, a son, died on the 15th of December. The coffin was not allowed in the meeting house for fear of spreading the disease. The next day, James and their daughter Gertrude, 14, passed away. The family was quarantined.
Hanson Bayless. While serving 1 term as sheriff of San Juan County, 2 outlaw cowboys were seen in the county. Hanson and his deputies rounded up the 2 cowboys and headed for Thompson, Utah, over 100 miles away. This was the closest railhead where the outlaws could be extradited to Colorado to stand trial for their misdeeds. Each night, Hanson and his deputies would take turns standing guard over the prisoners. One night, during Hanson's watch, everyone seemed to be asleep. Pretty soon, his eyes got heavy too, and he dozed off. All of a sudden, he heard someone call out his name, "Hanson!" He awoke just as one of the outlaws was grabbing for the rifle between Hanson's knees. Hanson got the rifle first, and the plan was foiled. They finished their journey and handed the outlaws over to...
The determined pioneers who settled here were not solely interested in conquering the land. They placed great importance on educating their hearts and their minds. The glory of God is intelligence, they believed. They had often been admonished to seek learning out of the best books by study as well as by faith.
This is a display. Kind of gives you an idea of when they were on the trail and they would stop for a few days of what their little encampment would look like.
Frederick I. and Mary Jones. Description by Albert R. Lyman. When in 1882, Frederick and Mary Jones accepted a mission call to the recently organized San Juan Mission, they left their small farm in Cedar City and joined by covered wagon to the little settlement named Bluff in the wilds alongside the San Juan River. As soon as they arrived, Fred set out to provide for his loved ones in Bluff as he had in Cedar City, but the lack of resources limited him. Fred had a garden, an orchard, and land in the field. His 2
The death of N.C. Bayless Butt, from the journal of her daughter Lenora Butt Jones. October 10th, 1897 was a windy, cold day. While playing with the children and popping corn for us, Mother was stricken with a coughing spell. By night she was chilly. We built a fire in the fireplace. By bedtime she was worse and retired without eating. She remarked to my father that she was grateful for her new sewing machine and for the way we children had taken over the household duties. Soon she dropped off to sleep and suddenly into convulsions. At 10 o'clock, the neighbors were summoned by my dear brother John, and Joseph Christensen was dispatched for Ed Hyde, an amateur surgeon. He came, but too late. Soon after midnight, Mother died, and also the babe which was never born. As other women had died in childbirth, so did my mother. She was 33 years old.
In April of 1880, 260 pioneers arrived here, concluding a 6-month journey of unparalleled difficulty. In the late 1870s, 70 families and a number of single men received calls or assignments from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to establish a settlement in the Four Corners region. Those were able to accept a call, along with others who volunteered, and marked various homelands in the southwestern Utah. Well, I'll have to say, I have been quite impressed with the Fort Bluff settlement. I really appreciated the fact that they had stories from the ancestors of the people that actually live here. Quite impressive. And I hope you've enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did, be sure to share this video with your family and friends. But until next time, y'all have a good day.